My son threw me out of the house I built with my own hands and kept all my assets just to hand them over to his new wife. You have 2 hours to pack and get out. I've already changed the locks, he said coldly. I was expecting at least some compassion after 40 years of sacrifice, but found only cruelty. All I had left was a worn-out debit card my late wife Amara left me. I thought it was empty. But when I walked into that Portland bank, the teller's face went pale. "Sir, hurry up. Look at this." He called his manager. I was shocked when I discovered that my quiet, humble wife had been secretly... Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and whether you think my son deserved what's coming. Hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get unbelievable. The gentle scraping of sandpaper against wood filled my small workshop behind the Portland home I'd called my own for over 4 decades. At 68, my weathered hands still moved with the precision of a master craftsman, smoothing the final imperfections from what would be my last piece, a simple oak chair with hand-carved details. I paused, running my fingers along the armrest. 40 years of sawdust and sweat had built this workshop, this house, this life. Every beam bore the mark of my labor. Every corner held memories of the family I'd raised here with my beloved Amara. "Dad, we need to talk." The voice cut through the workshop's peaceful silence. I looked up to see my son Mike standing in the doorway, his expensive suit looking out of place among the wood shavings. Behind him stood Amber Holbrook, Mike's new wife of barely 6 months, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming impatiently against her designer purse. "Of course, son." I set down my sandpaper and smiled, though something in Mike's expression made my chest tighten. "What's on your mind?" Mike stepped forward, his jaw set, in that stubborn way I remembered from his teenage years. But this was something harder, colder. "Dad, I need you to understand something. Amber and I are starting our own family now. We need space, privacy." "Well, the house is plenty big," I began, but Mike cut me off with a sharp gesture. "No, Dad, you don't understand." Mike's voice carried a finality that made my blood run cold. "I need you to move out. Today." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of my workbench. "Move out." "Son, this is my home. Our home. I built this place with my own hands before you were even born." Amber stepped forward, then her smile as artificial as her platinum blonde hair. "Graham, surely you can see this is for the best. Mike has worked so hard to build his company, and we really do need the space for our future children. This workshop, this house, your mother and I, we built this together. Every room holds 40 years of memories." Mike's expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew harder. "Mom's been gone for 3 years, Dad. It's time to move on. I've already looked into assisted living facilities." "I don't need assistance." My voice rose. "I'm 68, not 98. I built this house. I maintain this house." The silence that followed was deafening. Mike straightened his tie, a gesture I recognized as his way of steeling himself for unpleasant business. "Dad, I've made my decision." Mike's voice was flat businesslike. "You have 2 hours to pack what you need. I'll give you a week to arrange for the rest." I stared at my son and felt something break inside my chest. 2 hours to leave the home I built. 2 hours, Mike repeated. He turned to leave, then paused without looking back. "And Dad, I've already changed the locks. Don't bother trying to come back tonight." The cruelty of those words hit harder than anything else. I sank onto my workbench stool, the same one Amara used to sit on, while watching me work her gentle voice, filling the space with stories and laughter. 2 hours later, I stood on the sidewalk outside the house I'd built with my own hands, clutching a worn duffel bag that contained 40 years of life, reduced to a few changes of clothes and photographs. The October air bit through my flannel shirt, and I felt more lost than I had since Amara's funeral. My hands shook as I opened my wallet, counting the meager bills inside, barely enough for a motel room for a few nights. But as my fingers moved through the worn leather compartments, they brushed against something I'd forgotten. Was there a faded blue debit card bearing the name Amara Whitman? I held the card up to the streetlight, studying the worn plastic that had sat untouched in my wallet for 3 years. Amara had always been secretive about her little investments, as she called them. I'd never paid much attention. She handled the household finances while I focused on my carpentry work. "Maybe there's still something left," I whispered to the empty street, the card trembling in my weathered fingers, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. The next morning I walked into First National Bank with nothing but hope and desperation. I'd spent the night in a cheap motel, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of how my life had crumbled in just 2 hours. The faded blue card felt like my last lifeline. Maybe Amara had left enough for a security deposit on a small apartment. I approached the teller windows and chose the youngest one, hoping he might be patient with an old man fumbling through what was probably an outdated account. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The nameplate read Scott Anderson. I slid the worn card across the counter, feeling embarrassed by its faded condition. "I'd like to check the balance on this account, please. It belonged to my late wife." Scott picked up the card and began typing on his computer. At first, everything seemed routine, but then something changed. His typing slowed, then stopped altogether. His eyebrows drew together in confusion. "Is there a problem?" I asked, my heart sinking. Scott looked up at me, then back at his screen, his face pale. "Sir, I need to get my manager. Please just give me one moment." He walked quickly toward a glass office. Through the walls, I could see him speaking urgently to a middle-aged woman in a navy suit. She looked up sharply, her gaze finding me across the banking floor. Within moments, she was walking toward me. Her nameplate identified her as Linda Garrison, branch manager. "Mr. Whitman," she said, extending her hand, "would you mind if we spoke privately in my office? This account requires some special handling." My stomach dropped. Special handling. "Is there some kind of problem?" Linda's smile was careful. "Not a problem, sir. Quite the opposite. Mr. Whitman, this account is flagged as a high-priority legacy trust. I've been with this bank for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this." She led me to her office. "Before we proceed, I need to verify a few details. Your wife was Amara Whitman, correct? And she passed away approximately 3 years ago." "Yes," I said quietly. "She died of cancer, but I don't understand. She never mentioned any special accounts. We lived modestly. I'm just a carpenter." Linda exchanged a glance with Scott, then turned her computer monitor toward me. "Sir, your wife was apparently much more than that. This account is connected to a series of investment portfolios that have been growing for over 30 years. My hands gripped the arms of the chair as numbers began appearing on the screen. Investment accounts, stock portfolios, real estate holdings. The figures seemed impossible, surreal. "Mr. Whitman," Linda said gently, "are you feeling all right?" But I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the screen at numbers that seemed to dance before my eyes. Numbers with more zeros than I'd ever imagined possible. Numbers that represented a fortune I never knew existed. My modest carpenter's salary had been our only income, or so I'd thought. But here displayed in stark black and white was evidence of something else entirely. Investments in companies I'd heard of but never dreamed we could afford. Stock purchases dating back decades. Real estate holdings across multiple states. "Amara," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the quiet office. "What did you do?" In the bank's private vault, Linda handed me a sealed envelope that had been waiting in Amara's safety deposit box for 3 years. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal, recognizing my wife's careful handwriting. "My dearest Grom," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, and you found yourself in a situation where you need this anchor. I've prepared." I had to pause, wiping my eyes. Even in death, Amara's voice came through so clearly. That gentle wisdom that had guided our family for 43 years. "You probably think I was just your simple wife who clipped coupons and tended the garden. But Graham, I was watching. Every night when you fell asleep after your long days in the workshop, I was reading about technology, about companies that were going to change the world." A memory surfaced Amara at the kitchen table with newspapers scattered around her, always asking about those computer companies. I'd smiled and told her I was better with wood than technology, never realizing she was building our future while I built furniture. Starting in 1992, her letter revealed, I began investing small amounts of money I saved from our household budget, from selling my quilts. $500 here, $1,000 there. I bought shares in Apple, Microsoft, and later Google. You used to tease me about my little investments. Remember, Mum? Those little investments had grown into the fortune I'd just witnessed on Linda's screen. But the letter took a darker turn. "Graham, I saw how money changes people. I watched it happen to families in our neighborhood, and I saw the early signs in our own son. The way Mike's eyes would light up when he talked about wealth. The way he began measuring success only in dollars. I remembered those conversations, now Mike's growing obsession with status, with having the biggest house, the most expensive car. Amara had tried to warn me, but I'd dismissed it as young ambition. I saw it in Mike's eyes, that hunger, the letter continued, the way he looked at our house calculating its value, the way he talked about maximizing assets. I knew that someday when I was gone, he would see you as an obstacle to his inheritance. Amara had predicted yesterday's betrayal, years before it happened. So I created this anchor, my love, not to spoil you, but to ensure you have options when you feel cornered. I designed it to activate only in desperation because I know your pride. You would never have accepted charity, even from your own wife. The final paragraph made my chest tighten. Don't let him destroy what we built together, Graham. This money isn't just numbers. It's 43 years of love, sacrifice, and dreams. Use this gift wisely, protect our legacy, and don't let greed win. The letter was signed simply, Forever yours, Amara. I folded the letter, carefully pressing it against my chest, as if I could somehow hold onto her presence. Linda sat quietly, giving me space to process this revelation. I won't let you down, Amara, I whispered to the empty vault, but as I tucked the letter into my jacket pocket, a new determination settled in my chest. Amara had given me the tools, but she'd also given me a warning about our son. If Mike had betrayed me so easily, what else was he capable of? But first I need to know what Mike is really doing. 3 days later, I sat across from Lucas Hartwell, private investigator, in his modest office overlooking downtown Portland. The man came highly recommended, a former police detective who specialized in corporate fraud. Mr. Whitman, Lucas said, we'll look into contracts, client relationships, and financial records. But I need to warn you, sometimes families don't like what we find. I thought about Amara's letter. My wife saw something in our son years ago that I was too blind to notice. I need to know the truth. Lucas opened his laptop. Digital Dynamics Corp. Tech consulting and software development. Let's see what we can find. Over the next week, Lucas worked methodically. He followed Mike to client meetings, interviewed former employees, and accessed public business records. The first red flag appeared quickly. Graham, Lucas called me Thursday morning. Digital Dynamics has lost 3 major clients in 6 months. A healthcare system, a regional bank, and a manufacturing company. All terminated contracts early and demanded refunds. Lucas dug deeper. Former employees painted a disturbing picture. Mike had been promising clients advanced software solutions his company couldn't deliver. He would collect substantial upfront payments, then delay and make excuses when delivery dates approached. The pattern is consistent, Lucas explained. Mike oversells capabilities, collects 50 to 70% payment upfront, then delivers substandard work or nothing at all. When clients complain, he blames technical difficulties. The evidence was damning. Lucas obtained internal emails where Mike instructed employees to falsify progress reports. There were invoices for software licenses never purchased and timesheets showing work never performed. Here's where it gets worse, Lucas said, pulling out a thick folder. Mike's been creating fake financial reports for potential investors. He's claiming revenue that doesn't exist and hiding client losses. My hands shook looking through the documents. Email chains showed Mike lying directly to investors. Bank statements revealed upfront client payments, diverted to personal expenses, Amber's shopping, expensive vacations, luxury cars. The healthcare system paid him $200,000 for a patient management system he never delivered, Lucas continued. The bank paid $150,000 for security software that was actually a basic program he bought for $3,000 and rebranded. I felt sick. This wasn't business failure, this was deliberate fraud. Mike's been using the company's reputation to secure personal loans, claiming the business as collateral. He owes nearly $500,000 to various creditors, and Digital Dynamics doesn't have assets to cover it. The scope of my son's deception was staggering. He was systematically stealing from clients, lying to investors, building a house of cards about to collapse. Lucas placed the thick folder between us. Graham, your son isn't just failing, he's committing fraud. Wire fraud, investor fraud, breach of contract. We're talking federal crimes. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Page after page of evidence, forged documents, falsified bank statements, email chains detailing deception. One particularly damaging email showed Mike bragging to Amber about stupid clients who pay upfront for promises. Another document revealed he'd taken $250,000 from the manufacturing company for inventory management software, then subcontracted the work to overseas developers for $20,000 while pocketing the difference. How much did he steal? I whispered, staring at the mounting evidence of my son's betrayal. Not just of me, but of every client who trusted him. 1 week later, I sat in attorney Jonathan Mill's office surrounded by law books and 40 years of legal experience. Jonathan had been recommended by Linda as someone who specialized in corporate acquisitions. "Mr. Whitman," Jonathan said, reviewing Lucas's evidence folder, "your son's company is in serious trouble. Digital Dynamics owes $2.3 million to First National Bank, and they're about to apply pressure." "What does that mean?" "Mike's getting desperate, but there's an option that puts you in control." Jonathan pulled out a legal pad. "We create a shell company, Summit Capital LLC. This company purchases Digital Dynamics debt from the bank. When you buy a company's debt, you essentially control that company." The plan was elegant. Banks often sold problematic loans rather than deal with foreclosure. If Summit Capital purchased Mike's debt, I'd become his primary creditor with controlling leverage. "Mike won't know who's behind Summit Capital until we choose to reveal it," Jonathan explained. Over 3 days, Jonathan worked precisely. He established Summit Capital with me as sole owner, created banking relationships, and contacted First National's commercial lending department. The bank was receptive. Mike had been late on payments for 4 months, and his declining revenue made them nervous. "They'll sell the debt for 70 cents on the dollar," Jonathan reported. $1.6 million, and you'll own Mike's company." I signed the papers with steady hands, thinking of Amara's letter about protecting our legacy. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. Mike had stolen from clients, lied to investors, betrayed everything we'd taught him. The wire transfer completed Friday afternoon. Jonathan's phone rang within an hour. "It's done," he said. First National transferred all Digital Dynamics debt to Summit Capital. This gives you the right to call in the debt immediately or restructure ownership. He handed me more documents. I prepared paperwork to convert debt to equity. As of today, you own 78% of Digital Dynamics Corp. I held the ownership certificates, feeling their weight. My son had no idea his fate rested in my hands. "Mike still thinks he's seeking investors," I said. "Exactly. He's been making calls all week, arranging meetings with potential backers. He has no idea his primary creditor changed or that his new creditor knows him very well." Jonathan leaned back. "What's your next move?" I looked toward the downtown skyline where Mike's company occupied 2 floors of a glass tower. He was probably up there making promises to investors, spinning the same lies he'd been telling for months. The irony struck me. A week ago, Mike threw me out of the house I'd built with my hands. Today I owned the company he'd built with lies and theft. "Now comes the hard part," I said, folding the ownership documents carefully. Mike had betrayed not just me, but every client who'd trusted him. He'd used their money to fund his luxury lifestyle while delivering nothing but broken promises. The healthcare system still waited for their patient management software. The bank never received their security system. The manufacturing company's inventory problems remained unsolved. But now I had the power to make it right. Time to face my son. The next morning, Mike received a call about a potential major investor, wanting to meet immediately. According to Jonathan, who'd arranged the meeting through intermediaries, this investor represented significant capital. I arrived at Mike's office building early, taking the elevator to the 20th floor where Digital Dynamics occupied a corner suite. The receptionist directed me to conference room B, where I positioned myself facing the windows back to the door. Mike entered carrying his leather portfolio, wearing his most expensive suit. I could hear the confidence in his footsteps, a desperate man who thought salvation had arrived. "Good morning," Mike said to my back. "I'm Mike Whitman, CEO of Digital Dynamics. Thank you for considering our company." I turned slowly, watching his face transform from professional enthusiasm to complete shock. "Hello, son." Mike's portfolio slipped from his hands, papers scattering across the table. His mouth opened without sound, face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and growing panic. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "This is my business meeting. I'm expecting an investor." "Actually, us," I said, settling into the head chair. "This is our business meeting. I am the investor, Mike. Or more accurately, I'm the new majority owner of Digital Dynamics Corp." I slid the ownership documents across the table. Mike's hands trembled as he read the legal language spelling out his downfall. "This is impossible," he whispered. "You're a carpenter. You don't have this kind of money. Your mother was a remarkable, son. She saw things I was too blind to notice." I opened Lucas's investigation folder. She also taught me about protecting what we built together. Mike's face went pale as I revealed the evidence. Email printouts, financial records, client complaints, forged invoices, everything laid out chronologically. The healthcare system, I said. $200,000 for software you never delivered. The regional bank, $150,000 for security software that was actually a $3,000 program you rebranded. Dad, I can explain. The manufacturing company, $250,000 for inventory management. You subcontracted it overseas for $20,000 and kept the rest. My voice remained steady. How many clients trusted you while you bought Amber luxury vacations? Mike's composure cracked. It's not what it looks like. Business is complicated. Sometimes you make promises to secure funding. You stole from people, Mike. That healthcare system still waits for software to help patients. The bank's security remains unfixed because of your lies. I pulled out the most damaging evidence, Mike's emails to Amber bragging about stupid clients who pay up front for promises. Mike read his own words, shoulders sagging as reality settled in. The confident CEO facade collapsed, leaving only a frightened man who'd built success on stolen trust. What do you want? He asked quietly. I closed the folders and looked at my son. Really looked at him. Somewhere along the way, the boy I'd taught to use his first saw had become someone I didn't recognize. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, Mike. You threw me out because you thought I was powerless. You stole from clients for the same reason. But power isn't about expensive cars or big houses. I walked to the door, then turned back. You have 24 hours to decide, face the consequences like a man, or I'll let the authorities decide for you. Either way, the clients you stole from will get their money back. Mike sat alone as I left hands shaking as he reached for his phone, finally understanding his father was no longer the powerless old man he'd discarded. 24 hours passed. Mike never called. I sat in the FBI field office across from Agent Lisa Crawford, a sharp-eyed woman who specialized in white-collar crime. Lucas's evidence folder lay open between us. Agent Crawford, I said steadily, my son has defrauded multiple clients out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. She'd been reviewing the documents for an hour, making notes. Mr. Whitman, this is substantial evidence of wire fraud and embezzlement. These email chains show clear intent to deceive. The falsified invoices, fake progress reports were looking at federal charges. I nodded, thinking of healthcare workers still waiting for software, the bank's unresolved security issues, the manufacturing company's ongoing problems. Those clients deserve their money back, and other potential victims need protection. 2 days later, I watched from across the street as 3 black SUVs pulled up to Mike's building. Federal agents moved efficiently into the lobby. Jonathan called 20 minutes later. It's happening, Graham. They're executing the warrant. The arrest made local news. Local tech CEO arrested on federal fraud charges. Footage showed Mike being led out in handcuffs, face hidden, as reporters shouted questions. Amber appeared in the background, clutching her designer purse, panic-stricken. By the next day, she'd hired her own lawyer, publicly distancing herself from Mike. The trial took 3 months. I attended every day, sitting in the back as prosecutors laid out the case. Client after client testified about broken promises, stolen money, damaged businesses. Mike's attorney tried painting him as an overwhelmed entrepreneur, making mistakes under pressure. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails bragging to Amber about easy money, falsified documents, the pattern of taking payment without delivering. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, I felt no satisfaction, only deep sadness. The judge was stern during sentencing. Mr. Whitman, you systematically defrauded trusting clients, stealing money intended to improve healthcare security and operations. Your actions damaged not only finances, but faith in honest business. Mike received 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay $1.8 million in restitution. I sat watching my son's shoulders shake as reality settled in. This was the boy I'd taught to measure twice and cut once, to take pride in honest work, to build things that lasted. After the gavel fell, I walked outside. The prison transport van waited at the courthouse steps. Through reinforced windows, I could see Mike's silhouette, no longer the confident CEO, but a convicted felon, beginning a journey he'd chosen with every lie. The van pulled away, carrying my son toward consequences I'd hoped he'd never face. As I stood alone on the courthouse steps, watching the vehicle disappear into Portland traffic, I thought about Amara's letter. She'd seen this coming years ago, had tried to prepare me for the moment when love and justice would collide in the most painful way possible. The clients would get their money back. The healthcare system could finally purchase the software they needed. The bank could address their security vulnerabilities. Justice had been served. But I was still a father who'd just watched his son go to prison. Maybe this is what he needs to learn, I whispered to the empty courthouse steps. 6 months later, I received the first letter from Mike. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it, recognizing his handwriting on prison stationery. His words hit me harder than expected. Dad, I finally understand what I lost. Not just money, but your trust. I've had 6 months to think about everything and I'm ashamed. Not because I got caught, but because I became someone you and Mom never raised me to be. The letter described his daily routine at the federal facility. He'd enrolled in vocational carpentry, the same trade I'd tried teaching him as a boy when he was too impatient to listen. The instructor, Mr. Rodriguez, reminds me of you. He says measure twice, cut once. I remember you telling me that, but I never listened. I was always hurrying to the next thing, the bigger thing. 3 weeks later, I drove to the prison for our first meeting. Mike looked different, walking into the visiting room, thinner, wearing standard khakis instead of expensive suits. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by humility. Dad, he said quietly, sitting across from me, thank you for coming. Mike leaned forward, hands clasped. I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. Those clients trusted me and I stole from them. I stole from you, too. I stole the son you thought you'd raised. Justice had to be served, son, I replied. But you're still my boy. Mike's eyes filled with tears. I've been writing letters, Dad, to every client I defrauded. Not asking forgiveness, I don't deserve that. Just acknowledging what I did. Taking responsibility. He told me about the woodworking shop, how sawdust and tools reminded him of our old workshop. How he was learning patience, precision, honest work's value. Mr. Rodriguez says I have natural ability. Guess it runs in the family. He's teaching me furniture, making proper joinery. Things you tried teaching me when I was too stubborn. What are your plans when you get out? Mike straightened. I want to work, Dad. Real work. Pay back every penny I stole, even if it takes my whole life. Maybe construction carpentry is something honest. Build things instead of tearing them down. I studied his face for signs of old manipulation. But I saw genuine remorse, a man finally understanding his actions' weight. The healthcare system got their software, I told him. I made sure of it. The bank, too. All your clients got their money back. Mike nodded, tears streaming. Thank you. I know that was you, not the restitution order. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. It was the right thing to do. As visiting hours ended, Mike stood. Dad, I know I have no right to ask, but when I get out, could I maybe work with you? Learn the trade properly this time. I looked at my son and saw glimpses of the boy I'd once known, the one who'd gotten lost somewhere along the way. We'll see, Mike. Focus on becoming the man your mother would be proud of. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Mike was learning, growing, becoming someone different behind those walls. Amara, I said to the empty car, he's learning. But pulling into my driveway, I realized something else. Mike's redemption was only part of the story. Amara had given me more than just the means for justice. She'd given me the opportunity to create something lasting. Now I need to build something worthy of your legacy. 2 years later, the Whitman Learning Center opened its doors on a crisp October morning in Portland. I stood before the modest brick building holding the ceremonial scissors as local news cameras captured the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The center had been built with Amara's investment fortune transformed from numbers on a screen into something real, something that would help people rebuild their lives. This center represents second chances, I told the small crowd gathered on the sidewalk. It's for anyone who wants to learn a new skill, find honest work, or simply discover that it's never too late to start over. Inside, the classrooms were equipped with woodworking stations, computer labs, and spaces for teaching practical skills like home repair and small engine maintenance. The smell of fresh sawdust reminded me of my old workshop, but this time it represented hope rather than solitude. Mike had been released from prison 3 months earlier. True to his word, he'd spent his time learning carpentry and had written letters to every client he'd defrauded. More importantly, he'd learned something that couldn't be taught in any classroom: humility. Mr. Patterson, Mike said patiently to a 70-year-old former factory worker, let's try that email attachment one more time. There's no rush, we have all day. I watched from the doorway as Mike guided the older man through the computer basics class. The arrogant CEO who'd once bragged about stupid clients was gone, replaced by someone who understood that teaching required patience and genuine care. Our first graduating class had been small, 12 students ranging from 55 to 78 years old. but every one of them had found employment or started their own small business. Mrs. Pierce now ran a successful furniture repair service. Robert Martinez had launched a handyman business that stayed booked solid. Dat Mike said during our lunch break, "Mrs. Williams wants to know if we can add a sewing class next semester. She thinks there's demand for alterations and mending services." I nodded, making a note. Mike had become my unofficial program coordinator, and his ideas were always practical and thoughtful. Working together had slowly rebuilt the trust between us, not through grand gestures, but through shared purpose and daily proof of his changed character. "That's a good idea," I said. "Your mother always said the community needed more places where people could learn practical skills." At the end of the day, after the last student had left and Mike had gone home to his small apartment, I sat in my office looking at the framed photograph on my desk. Amara smiled back at me from our wedding day, her eyes bright with the same wisdom that had guided her secret investments decades ago. The center was more than just a training facility. It was proof that money could be transformed into something meaningful. Every student who learned a new skill, every person who found work, every small business that started here was part of Amara's true legacy. "Thank you, Amara," I whispered to the photograph. "Your legacy lives on, not in money, but in second chances." Outside Portland's evening lights were beginning to twinkle. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new opportunities for people to rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose. The Whitman Learning Center had become exactly what Amara had envisioned, an anchor for people who needed stability, a place where honest work was valued, and where second chances weren't just possible, they were guaranteed. Looking back at my journey, I realized that sometimes the hardest lessons come from the people we love most. My story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about understanding that true stories like mine happen every day when families are torn apart by greed and misplaced priorities. Don't be like Mike was don't let success blind you to what really matters. I've heard countless grandpa stories from other men my age, and they all echo the same truth. Money changes people, but character defines them. When Mike threw me out of my home, he thought he was eliminating an obstacle. What he didn't realize was that he was destroying the foundation of everything we'd built together. But here's what I learned, and what I want every father and son to understand. God has a way of turning our darkest moments into opportunities for redemption. When I found Amara's letter and discovered her investments, I knew God was giving me the tools, not just for justice, but for healing. And when Mike finally learned humility behind prison walls, I saw God's hand working in ways I never expected. The grandpa stories that matter most aren't about wealth or success. They're about second chances and the courage to rebuild what's been broken. These true stories remind us that it's never too late to choose love over pride, forgiveness over bitterness. That's why I share these grandpa stories, because real wisdom comes from lived experience. My advice: don't wait for a crisis to show your family what they mean to you. Don't let greed poison the relationships that should matter most. And remember that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to make things right. These true stories teach us that redemption is always possible. What's your second chance story? Share it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of family forgiveness and finding hope in the darkest moments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Every night, my son said he was working on his car in the garage. At 3 a.m., I heard a loud crash, and his voice whispering, "Don't let the old man find out." I hid and watched him load a heavy bag into his truck. When the bag opened, I froze when I saw what he had been hiding from me. Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching this story from. What would you do if you discovered your own family was hiding something this big? I've always been a light sleeper. At 65, running Brennan Antiques in Charleston's historic district for 40 years teaches you to listen for trouble. But that November night, something woke me that had nothing to do with my usual concerns. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Our old Charleston single house was quiet except for familiar settling sounds. My wife, Margaret, had passed 3 years ago, leaving just Derek and me in this big place on King Street. Then I heard it. A muffled thud from the garage, followed by Derek's pickup starting up. My heart quickened. Derek, 35, and working at the Charleston Heritage Museum, had always been responsible. 3 a.m. truck runs weren't his style. I slipped to the bedroom window facing the side yard. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. Derek was moving between the garage and his Ford F-150, carrying a heavy canvas bag. the kind we used at my shop for transporting delicate pieces. He moved carefully, like someone avoiding detection. The garage light cast shadows across the driveway. Derek's face looked strained as he hefted the bag into the truck bed. For a moment, the canvas gaped open. Even from my second-floor window, I could see the unmistakable gleam of silver. Genuine antique pieces. There was an ornate picture frame, definitely 18th century from the gilding. My trained eye caught colonial-era silver that made collectors' hearts race. But here's what made my stomach drop. Some pieces looked familiar. That silver tea service, wasn't that the Revere reproduction from my shop's display case? And that frame looked exactly like one from my back room. Derek made 2 more trips carrying bags and wrapped bundles. With each load, my confusion deepened. If these were from my shop, why sneak them out at 3 a.m.? More troubling, there were items I didn't recognize. Valuable pieces that looked like they belonged in a museum. A museum like the Charleston Heritage Museum where my son worked? Derek closed the tailgate and stood looking back at the house. I stepped away from the window instinctively. When I looked again, he was driving away. The headlights disappeared down King Street. I stood there 10 more minutes, mind racing through disturbing possibilities. Derek had keys to my shop, knew the security codes, had my complete trust. But he also had access to the museum's collection, pieces worth hundreds of thousands. I returned to bed but couldn't sleep. When his truck returned an hour later, I listened to careful footsteps on the stairs, his bedroom door closing softly. My son, who'd never taken a candy bar without permission, had just loaded what looked like stolen antiques into his truck. Derek had always been my pride and joy. Now I was watching him do something that could destroy everything we'd built. The morning couldn't come fast enough. I had to find out what was happening. The morning couldn't come fast enough, and by 8 a.m., I was already downstairs unlocking Brennan Antiques. The familiar smell of old wood polish and aged leather usually brought me comfort, but today everything felt different. I walked straight to the back room where I kept my most valuable pieces. My hands shook as I pulled out my inventory ledger, the same leather-bound book I'd used for 20 years. 4 pieces were missing. The Revere reproduction tea service, gone. An 18th century mahogany picture frame I'd been saving for the right buyer, gone. A set of colonial silver candlesticks that had been in my family for generations, gone. And most troubling, a pewter bowl that belonged to Margaret's grandmother, irreplaceable and definitely not for sale. I stared at the empty spaces, trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed in the darkness. Derek had access to everything new where I kept keys, understood every piece's value. But why would he take them? The front door chimed at exactly 9 a.m. Derek's punctuality had always been admirable, until today when it felt almost mocking. "Morning, Dad." His voice sounded strained. "You're here early." I turned slowly, studying my son's face. Dark circles, fidgeting hands, avoiding eye contact. This wasn't the Derek I'd raised. "We need to talk about last night." Derek's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Last night, 3:17 a.m., I saw you loading bags from our garage." I stepped closer. "Derek, where are my antiques?" His face went pale, then flushed. "Dad, I can explain." "Then explain. I'm missing 4 valuable pieces, and you're the only other person with access." Derek set down his coffee and ran both hands through his hair, a nervous habit since childhood. "It's not what you think. I wasn't stealing." "Then what?" "I was moving them somewhere safe, for a museum project." The words rushed out rehearsed. "Charleston Heritage Museum is working on a security initiative. We're temporarily relocating high-value pieces from private collections to protect them from a suspected theft ring." I stared at him. "A theft ring? 3 antique shops have been hit this month. Professional jobs. The museum offered secure storage until police catch whoever's doing it." It sounded plausible, almost. But something in Derek's voice made my stomach churn. "Why didn't you tell me? Why sneak around at 3 a.m.? I didn't want to worry you." The museum said discretion was crucial. Fewer people knowing about relocations, the better. The front door chimed again. "Derek, are you here?" Kira Blake stepped inside, and even after 2 years of marriage to my son, she still commanded attention. Tall, elegant auburn hair catching morning light through the windows. "Oh, Gordon." She smiled warmly, kissing my cheek. "I didn't expect you here so early." "Inventory check," I said carefully. Kira glanced between us, smile faltering. "Is everything all right?" "Dad saw me loading the antiques last night," Derek said quietly. Kira's expression shifted to understanding, then relief. Thank goodness Derek's been worried about keeping the museum project secret. I told him he should have explained everything from the beginning. She turned to me, green eyes earnest. Gordon Derrick is doing something wonderful. Charleston Heritage Museum identified a sophisticated theft ring, targeting collectors and dealers. They're offering secure storage until criminals are caught. The museum insisted on discretion. She continued squeezing my arm gently. Police think the thieves have inside information, someone who knows which shops have valuable inventory. I looked between them. Derek nodded earnestly. Your pieces are safer there, Dad. State-of-the-art security, climate control, everything. Kira smiled again. Derek was planning to tell you today anyway. The storage period is almost over. I wanted to believe them. Paternal instinct said trust my son. But something nagged at me, some detail that didn't fit. When do I get them back? Soon, Derek said. Very soon? I nodded slowly, letting their explanations settle over my doubts. Maybe 40 years in antiques had made me too suspicious. Maybe I was being paranoid. But 2 hours later, my world would collapse completely. 2 hours later, my world collapsed completely. 3 sharp knocks echoed through Brennan Antiques. Through the window, I saw a Charleston police cruiser already drawing stares from King Street tourists. Charleston Police, we need Derek Brennan. The lead officer, stern-faced and 40-ish, held up an official document. We have a warrant to search these premises and vehicles registered to Derek Brennan. We're investigating theft from Charleston Heritage Museum. The words hit like a physical blow. There must be some mistake. Is that Derek Brennan's Ford F-150 Outback? I nodded numbly, thinking of those bags I'd watched him load 8 hours earlier. Officers moved through my shop with practiced efficiency, photographing everything, checking serial numbers. Customers slipped out quietly. My life's work had become a crime scene. Derek arrived as they finished searching his truck. Dad, what's... He stopped, seeing the police cars, the gathering crowd. Derek Brennan, you're under arrest for theft of cultural property. What? No, there's been a mistake. But there hadn't been. In Derek's truck, wrapped in museum cloth, they found 6 Charleston Heritage Museum pieces. 18th century silver colonial paintings, artifacts worth hundreds of thousands. Mixed with them were my 4 missing antiques. Derek, how is this possible? I watched them read his rights. Dad, I can explain. His voice cracked. This isn't what it looks like. Kira arrived as they handcuffed Derek, running frantically in heels, pushing through gawkers. Derek, oh my God, what's happening? When she saw the handcuffs, she sobbed. Completely genuine sounding. Officers, please, there's been a terrible mistake. Ma'am, step back. Derek talked to me. Derek looked at his wife with pure anguish. Kira, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry for what you're scaring me. The performance was flawless. Kira clutched Derek's arm as they led him away, tears streaming, voice breaking with apparent confusion and terror. Gordon, do something, call a lawyer. I stood frozen, watching my son loaded into a police car like a common criminal. Phones came out recording the spectacle. 40 years building my reputation, and now this. We'll need you at the station for questioning Mr. Brennan, the officer told me. The police cars pulled away with Derek. The crowd dispersed, already spreading news through Charleston's tight-knit district. By evening, everyone would know Derek Brennan had been arrested for theft. Kira stood on the sidewalk watching the cars disappear, shoulders shaking with sobs. I was about to comfort her when she turned around. For just 2 seconds, when she thought no one was looking, I saw her face. The tears remained, but her eyes were completely cold, calculating. No grief, no shock, no confusion, only satisfaction. She caught me staring and immediately shifted back to devastated wife, but I'd seen enough. That night I couldn't sleep. Something was very wrong about Kira. The next morning I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of wallowing in shock, I was going to find out the truth about my daughter-in-law. I'd spent 40 years building relationships in Charleston's antique community. Time to use them. My first call was to Margaret Wells at Palmetto Antiques. We'd traded pieces and information since the 70s. Margaret, it's Gordon. Have you ever heard anything about Kira, my daughter-in-law? A pause. Kira Blake. The redhead can't say I have. Why, just curious about her background. She's been family for 2 years, but I don't know much about her past. 3 more calls to dealers yielded nothing. Kira had never been involved in Charleston's antique scene before marrying Derek. For someone married to a museum curator and living with an antique dealer, that seemed odd. Next, I turned to social media. Kira's profiles were perfectly curated. Beautiful photos of her and Derek at restaurants, galleries, museum events. But scrolling back through 2.5 years of posts, something struck me. There was nothing before Derek. No college friends, no family photos, no history. Her social media began exactly when she started dating my son. I pulled out Derek's photo albums. There. Their first date inscription, Kira and me at Magnolia Plantation, September 15th, 2.5 years ago. I checked Derek's employment records. He'd started at Charleston Heritage Museum September 1st, 2.5 years ago. 2 weeks. Kira met Derek just 2 weeks after he started his museum job. Coincidence. My 40 years in business had taught me to be suspicious of coincidences involving valuable objects and attractive women. I needed more information, and I knew who to ask. Mrs. Dorothy Ashford lived next door, a sprightly 80-year-old who'd been watching the neighborhood since the Eisenhower administration. I found her deadheading roses with surgical precision. "Dorothy, have you noticed anything unusual about Kira lately?" Her eyes sharpened. "Funny you should ask. I've been wondering about that girl for months." "What do you mean?" "She's been having meetings at that cafe on Meeting Street with outdoor tables. I walk past there for my library book club. Meetings with whom? Men. Always different but similar. Expensive suits, fancy watches, polished appearance. Not tourists, though." My pulse quickened. "How do you know?" "Tourists don't have serious business conversations." These were intense. Leaning in close, taking notes, exchanging envelopes. Envelopes. Small ones. Cash or documents, maybe. Dorothy snipped another rose. She always looked around nervously, checking if anyone was watching. "How long?" "At least 6 months. I noticed because she dressed up for coffee dates, but told Derek she was running errands or meeting girlfriends." My mouth went dry. "She lied." "Constantly. Once I heard her tell Derek she was grocery shopping, but I'd just seen her walking back from Meeting Street without bags." Dorothy fixed me with a steady gaze. "Gordon, something about that girl never sat right. She's too perfect, too charming. People who work that hard to be likable are usually hiding something." I thanked Dorothy and walked home mind racing. Secret meetings with strangers, lies about whereabouts, social media history beginning exactly when she met Derek. I needed to know who Kira Blake really was. I needed professional help, and I knew exactly who to call. Kenneth Walsh had been a Charleston police detective for 25 years before starting his private investigation firm. We'd met when he'd helped me track stolen Civil War memorabilia. If anyone could uncover the truth about Kira Blake, it was Kenneth. His office was in a converted Calhoun Street house, all hardwood floors and lazy ceiling fans. "Gordon, good to see you, though. I'm sorry about the circumstances." Kenneth was lean 50-ish with the steady gaze of someone who'd spent years reading lies. "Tell me what you need." I explained everything. Derek's arrest, the mysterious antiques, Kira's explanations, Mrs. Dorothy's observations about secret meetings. Kenneth took notes, asking occasional questions. When I finished, he leaned back. "You think the wife's involved?" "I think she's not who she claims to be." "Give me 48 hours. Kenneth called, the next afternoon voice grim. "Gordon, you need to come in. What I found is bigger than expected." An hour later, I sat across from Kenneth as he spread photographs and documents across his desk like murder trial evidence. "Kira Blake doesn't exist?" he said without preamble. "At least not the version your son married." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" "The woman in your house is Kira Summers. Criminal record in Florida. Fraud identity theft conspiracy. Served 18 months federal prison 3 years ago." Kenneth slid a mugshot across the desk. Definitely Kira, but harder, with shorter hair, and those cold eyes I'd glimpsed after Derek's arrest. Federal prison. Art theft ring. High-end stuff, paintings, sculptures, antiques. They'd target wealthy collectors. Auction houses working months to set up single jobs. The room spun. "And she married my son?" "Gets worse." Kenneth pulled out another file. "Her ring's still active. International operation moving stolen art through dealer networks. FBI's been tracking them for years. She's still involved? She married Derek specifically for access to Charleston's art scene. Your shop, his museum. Perfect cover. Legitimate access to valuables, insider security knowledge, respectable husband above suspicion." I stared at the mugshot, remembering how she'd charmed me from day one. Always interested in my inventory, asking about provenance and values. Encouraging Derek's museum career, praising his expertise. 2.5 years of setup, I said quietly. Serious commitment to a con. Kenneth leaned forward. "Those men Mrs. Ashford saw Kira meeting, I showed her photos of known associates. She identified too." My blood chilled. "They're here. Months now. Setting up operations, identifying targets." Kenneth's expression darkened. "Your son isn't criminal, Gordon. He's a patsy. Kira manipulated him from day one. moving pieces accessing restricted areas providing information. When arrest came, guess who'd be holding evidence? The betrayal's scope hit like a physical blow. Derek's confusion during arrest, desperate apologies, genuine shock at finding stolen goods. All real. She framed him. Classic misdirection. While everyone focuses on the corrupt museum, curator real criminals disappear with millions in stolen art. Derek was sitting in jail, probably still trying to understand how his life collapsed. My son, who'd never cheated on a test, facing federal charges because he'd loved the wrong woman. What do we do? Kenneth gathered files. Normally I'd say local police, but Kira's people are sophisticated. They've covered tracks well. Local cops might lack resources for international art theft operations. Then what? Federal help, FBI art crime team specifically. They've hunted this network for years. Kenneth met my eyes. But once you make that call, there's no going back. This becomes federal investigation, and everyone, including Derek, becomes part of it. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 65 years. Derek needed help, but I needed power greater than anything I could provide. My son needed saving, and I was going to save him. The FBI field office in Charleston was all concrete and bulletproof glass designed to intimidate. I'd never imagined walking through those doors voluntarily carrying evidence about my own daughter-in-law. Security was thorough. Metal detectors guards who looked like they could bench press trucks. After explaining my purpose, I waited 40 minutes before Agent Elowen Porter appeared. Early 40s, sharp blue eyes, prematurely gray hair in a no-nonsense ponytail. Her handshake was firm manner, all business. Mr. Brennan, you have information about art theft operations. My daughter-in-law is part of an international smuggling ring, and my son's in jail for her crimes. Agent Porter's expression didn't change, but I caught interest flickering. Let's talk privately. Her office was spartanly furnished. Government desk computer walls covered with photographs of stolen artwork. Paintings, sculptures, antiques, all stamped, recovered, or missing in red. I spread Kenneth Walsh's files across her desk, explaining everything from Derek's midnight runs, to Kira's secret meetings, to her suspicious timing in our lives. Agent Porter studied each document, making occasional notes. When I finished, she leaned back. Mr. Brennan, you've just handed me our biggest break in 3 years. You know Kira. Kira Summers has been on our watch list since prison release. What we didn't know was her location or operational status. She pulled out a thick file. She's key player in the collector network. International art theft and smuggling operation. My stomach dropped. International, over 50 million stolen across 6 countries. Museum heists, private collections, auction cons. Sophisticated patient, extremely dangerous. Dangerous how Agent Porter's expression darkened. 2 potential witnesses died in apparent accidents. Miami gallery owner, Atlanta collector. We suspect murder. The room felt cold. This woman's been living in my house 2 years, using your son as unwitting accomplice while planning their next operation. Charleston's art scene is worth millions. Perfect target. Can you help Derek? If you help us. We need evidence of active conspiracy. Recorded confessions, operational documentation, network proof. Help. You become our inside man. Kira doesn't know we've identified her. You're just Derek's confused father, probably desperate for answers. My mouth went dry. You want me to approach her? Offer to help her. Say you've figured out Derek's activities, understand the antique business could be valuable to her operation. She'll never believe that. You're 65 widowed watching your son face federal charges. Could be a man who's lost everything willing to do anything for his boy, or realize there's money in gray markets. Agent Porter produced a recording device button-sized. We'll wire you position backup teams. Get her talking about plans, associates, operations. If she suspects so, that's why we'll have backup close. Matter-of-fact tone carried underlying warning. Mr. Brennan, I won't lie. This is dangerous. These people kill to protect operations. I thought about Derek in jail, wondering how his father could believe him criminal. About Kira's cold eyes when unguarded. About 40 years building honest business destroyed by lies. What do I do? Agent Porter smiled for the first time. Convince Kira Blake you want to join her team. Make her believe you'll betray everything you've stood for to save your son. She handed me her direct number. Can you do that? I pocketed the card and stood. Agent Porter, I've spent 40 years reading people in antiques. I know when someone's selling me fakes. And now it's my turn to be the seller. That evening I prepared for the most dangerous meeting of my life. At 9 p.m. I made the call that would either save my son or get me killed. Kira, it's Gordon. I need to see you tonight, at the shop. A pause. Gordon, it's late. Can't this wait? It's about Derek, about what he was really doing. I let desperation creep into my voice. I know Kira. I know everything. Longer pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I checked Agent Porter's recording device. Button-sized, invisible ones attached. FBI teams were positioned around King Street, but felt miles away as I waited in my darkened shop. Kira arrived exactly on time, heels clicking before she knocked. Perfect as always. Elegant coat-styled hair, concerned expression. Gordon, you sounded upset. What's this about? I locked the door and gestured toward the back office. We need privacy. She followed, but I noticed her eyes scanning Sightline's exit routes, professional habits. Oh, sit down. I settled behind my desk, projecting broken old man. I've been thinking since Derek's arrest. We all have. It's been horrible. Has it or exactly what you planned? Something shifted in her posture. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. 2.5 years of planning. Meeting Derek 2 weeks after he started the museum job. Her mask slipped slightly. Gordon, you're not thinking clearly. More clearly than in months. I pulled out Kenneth Walsh's file. Kira Summers, federal prison, art theft conspiracy. She went still. Only the old building's settling sounds remained. How did you... Does it matter? Question is what now? Kira calculated weighing options. What do you want? My son out of jail, and compensation for being played. Compensation. You used my shop connections reputation. Derek's going to prison for your crimes. Cut me in on profits. She laughed like breaking glass. You think you can blackmail me? I think we can help each other. You need legitimate access to Charleston's market. Someone who knows collectors' weak auction house security. I leaned back. I need money for Derek's defense. Kira studied me, then slowly smiled. I always suspected you were smarter than you seemed. Smart enough to know when I'm beat. Derek's finished. I don't have to be. What exactly are you proposing? Partnership. Tell me what you're really after, I help you get it. You make Derek's charges disappear, give me percentage. Kira pulled out her phone, sent a quick text. Derek's charges can't disappear, but they can be redirected. Redirected how? Made to look like he was coerced by someone else. Her smile turned predatory. Someone like you. Desperate father who forced his son to steal from his employer. My blood chilled. That wasn't the plan, but it's what's happening. Unless you'd prefer Derek's federal prison cell. She leaned forward, voice dropping to intimate whisper. You want to know the beautiful part? Gordon Derek never suspected a thing. I spent 2 years making him fall so deeply in love, he'd do anything I asked. Move inventory after hours for security reasons. Access restricted museum areas for special projects. He was so eager to impress me. You manipulated him. I destroyed him. Pure satisfaction in her voice. And when the time came, I made one anonymous call to police about suspicious activity at Brennan Antiques. Derek was so confused when they found stolen goods in his truck. Kept saying he was just helping his wife with museum business. Outside car doors slammed, multiple vehicles. Kira's smile widened. Did you really think I didn't know you'd try something? 3 large men in expensive suits walked through my door without knocking. Gentlemen, Kira said pleasantly, meet Derek's father. He's been asking too many questions. The largest cracked his knuckles. Should we take him somewhere private? Kira looked at me with those cold eyes. No need. Your son is in jail, Gordon. No one left to protect you. She stood slowly savoring the moment. Time to send you on your way. I'd heard everything needed to save Derek, but might not live to use it. Kira nodded to the largest man. Make it quick and clean. He reached inside his jacket, and I saw the metallic glint of a gun barrel. This was it. I was about to die in my own shop, surrounded by 40 years of carefully collected antiques. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. Overturning my desk chair, I bolted toward the front of the shop, weaving between display cases and furniture. Behind me, I heard Kira curse, and the heavy footsteps of her enforcers giving chase. Don't let him reach the street, she shouted. The second gunman appeared at the front door, blocking my escape route. His weapon was already drawn, pointed directly at my chest. End of the line, old man. I was trapped between armed killers in my own store, with nowhere left to run. The recording device felt like a lead weight against my chest. All that evidence, all that proof of Derek's innocence about to die with me. Then the front windows exploded inward. FBI, drop your weapons. Agent Elowen Porter came through the shattered glass like an avenging angel service weapon, drawn backup agents flooding in behind her. Simultaneously, the back door burst open as more federal agents swarmed the shop. Federal agents get on the ground now. The gunman at the front door spun toward the new threat, and I dove behind a Civil War-era armoire as the shooting started. It was over in seconds. Professional law enforcement against street criminals. There was no contest. The sharp crack of gunfire shouted commands, the crash of overturning furniture, then sudden ringing silence. Clear front, clear back. Suspects down. I peered around the armoire to see two of Kira's men on the ground hands, zip-tied behind their backs. The third was being treated by a paramedic for what looked like a shoulder wound. Kira herself was pressed against the back wall, Agent Porter's gun trained on her center mass. Kira Summers, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, art theft, racketeering, and about 15 other federal charges. I'm going to enjoy reading to you. You can't prove anything, Kira snarled, but her composure had finally cracked completely. Gone was the elegant Charleston socialite. This was the federal prisoner, the career criminal, the predator who destroyed my son's life for profit. Actually, we can, Agent Porter smiled grimly. Mr. Brennan's recording device picked up your entire confession, including the part where you admitted to framing Derek and ordering his father's murder. Kira's face went white as the handcuffs clicked shut. Kira Summers, Agent Porter continued, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a federal court of law. As they led her away, Kira caught my eye one last time. The mask was completely gone now, just cold hatred and the fury of a predator whose long game had finally been exposed. This isn't over, she hissed. Yes, it is, I replied quietly. Agent Porter approached me as the crime scene team began processing my destroyed shop. Mr. Brennan, are you injured? I shook my head, still trying to process what had just happened. The recording. Did you get everything? Every word? Confession to art theft, conspiracy, manipulation of Derek ordering your murder? It's all there. She holstered her weapon. We've been trying to get evidence like this on the Collector Network for 3 years. What you did tonight will put them away for decades. And Derek? Agent Porter's expression softened. Derek will be released tomorrow morning. All charges dropped. The recording makes it clear he was an unwitting victim of an elaborate con game. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to sit down on a nearby chair. He's really free. He's really free. Mr. Brennan, your son, is going to need time to process what happened to him. 2.5 years of psychological manipulation doesn't heal overnight. But he's alive, he's innocent, and he's going home. I looked around my shop. Windows, shattered furniture, overturned police tape everywhere. It would take months to repair the damage. But Derek was coming home. Agent Porter, thank you for everything. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. What you did tonight took real courage. 3 days later, I stood waiting at the gates of Charleston County Jail, watching for my son to walk free. 3 days later, I stood at Charleston County Jail gates, watching the most important door in my world swing open. Derek emerged blinking in November sunlight, wearing clothes from his arrest 4 days earlier. 4 days that felt like years. He looked older, worn by an experience no innocent man should endure. When he saw me, his face crumpled. Dad, I'm so sorry. I pulled my son into a hug 40 years of fatherhood had built toward. You have nothing to apologize for. I believed her, trusted her, let her use me to hurt you, the shop, everything we built. Derek, you fell in love. That's not a crime. We drove home in comfortable silence. Derek stared at Charleston streets like seeing them for the first time. Tell me how she did it, I said finally. Derek was quiet then, started small. She'd ask about museum work, seem interested in collection security, said she wanted to understand my passion. You wanted to impress her? This beautiful woman was interested in me, my work. She'd suggest I photograph pieces for her research check items after hours, always with reasonable explanations. When did it escalate? 6 months ago. Said the museum was concerned about theft rings. Asked me to temporarily move high-value pieces to secure locations, including your shop, until better security was installed. And you believed her. She had documentation, Dad. Official papers calls with supposed board members. She'd created entire false reality around me. His voice broke. I thought I was protecting art. Instead, I was stealing it. You were protecting what you loved. She used that against you. We pulled into our driveway. Derek stared at the house where Kira had lived and lied 2 years. How did you see through her when I couldn't? Experience? 40 years dealing with con artists, thieves who thought they could fool the old antique dealer. I turned off the engine, but mostly I knew my son. You weren't capable of what they accused you of. I feel like such a fool. You learned an expensive lesson about trust. Question is, what now? Derek looked at me hopefully. What do you mean? The shop needs rebuilding. Windows replaced, inventory, reorganized, reputation restored. I could use a partner who understands both antiques and museums. You'd want me to work with you after everything. Derek, you're my son. More than that, you're a good man who trusted the wrong woman. If I can't forgive that, what kind of father am I? That evening we planned. Derek would continue at Charleston Heritage Museum. They'd offered his job back with apologies. But evenings and weekends he'd help rebuild Brennan Antiques. We'll make it stronger than before. Derek said, sketching security improvements. We'll make it honest, I corrected. That's all it needs to be. A month later, Brennan Antiques reopened with new windows, better security, and a sign reading, Father and Son Est, 1984. Business was better than ever. Surviving international art theft conspiracy was good publicity. Derek was healing slowly, but surely. The museum promoted him to senior curator, and I'd learned 65 wasn't too old to be a hero when family needed saving. How do you trust again after something like this? Derek had asked. Carefully, thoughtfully. But you do trust because the alternative is living in fear. And you remember that wisdom comes from surviving times when trust was misplaced. Sometimes the greatest antiques aren't objects. Their wisdom passed through generations' bonds, holding families together. Knowledge that love and experience can overcome even elaborate deceptions. Looking back at my story, I realize how close I came to losing everything. Don't be like me. Don't wait until disaster strikes to truly see the people around you. I spent 2.5 years living with a criminal thinking I knew my family. The lesson I learned is simple: trust your instincts, especially when something feels too perfect. God gave us intuition for a reason, and I ignored mine for too long. When that beautiful woman swept into Derek's life with perfect timing, I should have asked harder questions. Grandpa stories like mine teach us that experience matters. Those gut feelings aren't paranoia, they're wisdom. This true story changed how I see family relationships. I realized that protecting someone sometimes means having difficult conversations. God blessed me with 65 years of experience, but I was afraid to use it because I didn't want to seem like an interfering old man. Don't make my mistake. When you sense deception, investigate. When someone tries to isolate your loved ones, speak up. God puts people in our lives to watch out for each other, and sometimes being the suspicious old grandpa is exactly what your family needs. Grandpa stories remind us that age brings perspective, not irrelevance. True story experiences teach us that love sometimes means being the one everyone thinks is wrong, until you're proven right. Grandpa stories show us that wisdom comes from surviving life's hardest lessons. This true story proved that family bonds can survive even the most elaborate deceptions. What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your engagement helps us bring more meaningful stories to families everywhere.